Clarity of mind is not something that suddenly appears. It is cultivated, nurtured, and refined through deliberate practice and conscious awareness. In the modern world, the mind is constantly bombarded with noise, endless streams of information, social expectations, responsibilities, and distractions that blur the ability to see reality as it truly is. When the mind is clouded, decisions become confused, emotions are easily stirred, and inner peace feels out of reach. To understand clarity of mind is to understand the art of clearing away what does not belong so that what is essential can rise to the surface. The mind is like a lake. When disturbed, the surface ripples and the reflection of the world becomes distorted. You cannot see what lies beneath the water, nor can you clearly observe the sky above it. But when the water becomes still, the reflection is pure and both the surface and depth are revealed. The practice of stilling the mental waters allows a person to perceive truth with accuracy, to act without hesitation, and to walk through life with balance. This clarity is not a luxury. It is a necessity for anyone who wishes to live with intention rather than be driven by chaos. Clarity does not mean the absence of thought, but rather the ordering of thought. It is the ability to recognize which ideas are useful, which emotions are temporary, and which impulses are distractions. Without clarity, the mind attaches itself to every fleeting desire or fear, creating confusion and heaviness. The individual begins to identify with passing thoughts, mistaking them for truth, and thus suffers from the inability to distinguish between what is real and what is imagined. The disciplined mind, on the other hand, becomes like a sharpened blade, cutting through illusion and focusing only on what matters. One of the greatest obstacles to clarity is attachment. The more we hold on to preconceived ideas, rigid expectations, or unresolved emotions, the more the mind becomes entangled. It is like carrying unnecessary weight on a long journey. With every step, the burden slows progress, clouds perception, and creates fatigue. To find clarity is to lay down this weight, to let go of what does not serve the path, and to allow space for new insight to emerge. This is not an act of weakness but of strength, for it requires trust in the unfolding of life and in one's own ability to adapt. Another obstacle is distraction. The modern world thrives on scattering attention. Screens, notifications, noise, and constant demands for response keep the mind fragmented. A fragmented mind cannot see clearly because its attention is divided into countless pieces. To reclaim clarity, attention must be gathered back into the present moment. When the mind learns to rest fully on one task, one breath, one thought at a time, it recovers its natural strength. This gathering of attention is not only a practice of focus, but also an act of self-mastery, because it shows that one's energy is not wasted on things that do not truly matter. Clarity of mind also arises from discipline in speech and action. When words are spoken carelessly, when actions are driven by impulse, the mind becomes restless and unsettled. Every careless act leaves behind residue, small fragments of regret or doubt that accumulate over time. These fragments cloud judgment and disturb inner calm. But when one chooses words deliberately, acts with integrity, and respects both self and others, the mind remains light and unburdened. Clarity grows naturally in such a state because there is no conflict between thought, word, and action. Silence plays a vital role in cultivating clarity. In silence, the constant chatter of the mind begins to fade. Beneath the surface noise lies a deeper intelligence, a wisdom that is always present but often drowned out. By spending time in silence, whether through meditation, mindful breathing, or simply withdrawing from external noise, the inner voice becomes audible. This voice does not shout, it whispers. But within its subtlety lies guidance, strength, and profound clarity. The more one turns inward to listen, the clearer life's path becomes. Clarity is not rigid. It does not mean having all the answers or holding fixed opinions about everything. True clarity is fluid, adaptable, and open. It is the ability to see things as they are in this moment without distortion from fear, desire, or past conditioning. Just as a clear mirror reflects whatever stands before it without attachment, a clear mind reflects reality without distortion. From this place, decisions are not made from confusion but from awareness, and actions are aligned with truth rather than illusion. When clarity of mind is cultivated, energy flows more freely. Instead of scattering in multiple directions, it becomes concentrated and powerful. Such energy does not need to be forced. It arises naturally when the mind is no longer at war with itself. This concentrated energy is what allows individuals to pursue goals with consistency, face challenges with resilience, and maintain inner calm even in turbulent situations. It is not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of clarity that determines how gracefully one navigates life. Ultimately, clarity of mind is both a practice and a state. It is cultivated through letting go of attachments, reducing distractions, practicing silence, and aligning thought with action. It is a state in which the mind becomes like still water, reflecting truth without distortion. From clarity arises wisdom, and from wisdom arises the strength to live with purpose, balance, and authenticity. Clarity of mind is not found outside, in the noise of the world, but within, in the quiet space where thought, awareness, and being merged into one continuous stream of understanding. To speak of self-mastery is to step into a field where discipline, awareness, and inner strength converge. It is not about conquering others, nor is it about gaining dominance over the external world. True mastery begins and ends within the self. It is the journey of recognizing the layers of illusion that the mind creates and moving through them with patience and determination. To master oneself means to understand the workings of the mind, to observe emotions without becoming their servant, and to cultivate the strength to remain centered in the face of both joy and suffering. Self-mastery does not arrive through chance. It is cultivated slowly, deliberately, like a seed planted in the soil that demands care, consistency, and nourishment. Just as a tree does not grow strong overnight, neither does mastery of the self. It requires small, repeated acts of discipline. Waking up when the body wishes to sleep, continuing to practice when the mind whispers of fatigue, resisting the temptation of comfort when growth demands discomfort. The one who masters the self is not free of struggle. Rather, they are skilled in navigating struggle. They do not seek to avoid difficulty, but instead allow difficulty to refine their character. At the heart of self-mastery lies awareness. To be aware is to step outside the clouded lens of reactive thought and see with clarity. Most people live their lives in reaction, responding to circumstances without reflection. Words are spoken in anger, decisions are made from fear, and actions are shaped by the pull of desire. But self-mastery demands a pause. In that pause, awareness arises. In that pause, the individual is no longer a puppet pulled by strings of impulse, but the conscious presence that can choose wisely. This awareness is like the sword that cuts through illusion, and the more it is practiced, the sharper it becomes. Another essential pillar of self-mastery is the discipline of the body. The body is the vessel that carries the mind and spirit. If the body is weak, neglected, or enslaved by habits, mastery cannot be achieved. Training the body is not only about strength or endurance, but about obedience. When the body obeys the command of the will, when it is no longer controlled by laziness, cravings, or addictions, then it becomes an ally in the pursuit of mastery. Every movement, every breath, every posture can either support or hinder this path. To train the body is to remind oneself daily that discipline is not punishment but liberation. Equally important is the mastery of emotion. Human beings are emotional creatures, and emotions are powerful forces. Left unchecked, they can destroy relationships, cloud judgment, and pull one into cycles of regret. But emotions, when understood and directed, become sources of strength. Anger can be transmuted into determination. Fear can be transformed into caution that sharpens awareness. Sadness can deepen compassion. The one who has mastered the self does not suppress emotions, nor do they allow emotions to control them. They feel deeply, yet remain steady, like a mountain that does not crumble when storms arrive. Self-mastery also requires the discipline of thought. The mind is restless by nature. It runs toward memories of the past or projections of the future, often distracting from the present moment. This restless movement creates suffering because it is never satisfied. The art of mastery is to bring the mind into silence, to direct it as a servant rather than being enslaved by it. Through meditation, concentration, and mindfulness, the mind learns to focus. A focused mind is powerful. It can hold an intention, visualize with clarity, and execute with precision. Without mastery of thought, actions remain scattered and life becomes fragmented. Beyond body, emotion, and thought lies another dimension of mastery, the alignment with inner values. To master oneself is not simply to discipline the faculties, but to live in accordance with principles that are unshakable. Integrity, honesty, compassion, patience. These are not imposed by the external world, but chosen within. When the individual lives according to values, their life gains a direction that is not easily swayed by the turbulence of circumstance. It is easy to compromise values when faced with temptation or pressure, but true mastery reveals itself when values are upheld even in difficulty. Patience is another quality deeply woven into self-mastery. In a world where everything demands speed and instant gratification, patience becomes rare. But mastery cannot be rushed. The body does not transform overnight. The mind does not become calm in a single sitting. Emotions are not tamed in a day. Self-mastery is a lifelong practice, and patience ensures that the practitioner does not abandon the path when progress feels slow. Patience allows one to endure setbacks without losing hope and to continue walking steadily even when the destination feels far. The journey of self-mastery also teaches humility. To master oneself is not to declare perfection. In fact, it is to realize how much remains unknown and how much more there is to refine. The more one learns, the more one sees the vastness of what has yet to be mastered. This humility protects from arrogance and keeps the path clear of pride. Without humility, the pursuit of mastery becomes corrupted by ego, and the individual falls into the trap of believing themselves superior. But humility anchors the practice in sincerity, reminding that mastery is not for the sake of comparison, but for inner liberation. Discipline, awareness, patience, humility, alignment. These qualities weave together to form the fabric of self-mastery. The path is not easy, but it is the only path that grants freedom from the chains of impulse, distraction, and inner conflict. The one who masters themselves does not require external control, for they are their own ruler. They no longer search desperately for validation because their worth is grounded in their own integrity. They no longer chase endlessly after fleeting pleasures because they have found fulfillment in the strength of their own being. Self-mastery is not a destination, but a process. Every day presents opportunities to choose discipline over indulgence, awareness over distraction, patience over frustration, humility over arrogance. It is in these small, consistent choices that mastery is slowly built. The individual who walks this path discovers that the greatest enemy was never outside, but always within. And in conquering this inner enemy, they discover a freedom that cannot be taken away. To live a meaningful life is not only about what you welcome, but also about what you refuse to allow. Many imagine boundaries as walls built from stone, sharp and cold, designed to keep people away. But boundaries, when set with grace, are not walls, they are gardens. A garden flourishes not because it is open to everything, but because it chooses what nourishes the soil and what harms it. Graceful boundaries are rooted in clarity and maintained with kindness. They do not punish others, they protect the inner space where peace and growth can take place. When people lack boundaries, they often drift into exhaustion, resentment, and disconnection from their own essence. The absence of boundaries creates a life where others' needs, demands, and energies dictate the rhythm of one's days. It is like a river without banks, spilling everywhere, unable to flow with direction and purpose. The art of boundaries is the art of reclaiming form without closing the heart. It is not resistance but alignment. Grace lies in the way one draws lines without aggression, speaks truths without hostility, and maintains firmness without cruelty. Boundaries with grace begin with self-awareness. Without knowing where you end and the world begins, you cannot shape the edges of your energy. This awareness requires listening inwardly: what expands you, what depletes you, what feels harmonious, what feels intrusive. Grace means you do not accuse or blame others for crossing limits you have never expressed. Instead, you learn to honor your inner signals and communicate them with steadiness. Graceful boundaries are not born from fear, but from respect for yourself and for the other. Many think that to be kind, one must always say yes. But true kindness is not people-pleasing. True kindness emerges when you remain whole, when your yes is sincere and your no is clear. A yes without boundaries often carries hidden bitterness. A no spoken with grace carries honesty, clarity, and even love. It is possible to decline an invitation, a demand, or an expectation without hostility. The tone, the energy, and the presence matter more than the words themselves. Boundaries spoken through aggression create division. Boundaries spoken through grace create understanding, even if not agreement. Boundaries also extend beyond people to habits, environments, and patterns. To continue engaging with situations that drain your energy is to erode your inner strength. To allow endless noise, distraction, or unhealthy consumption into your mind is to let your inner garden wither. Graceful boundaries in this sense mean choosing what you allow into your body, into your attention, into your time. Discipline becomes an act of compassion when it protects your deepest values. A boundary here is not a cage, it is a conscious choice to nurture clarity, vitality, and alignment. Grace within boundaries does not mean softness without strength. Grace is strength refined. To set a boundary without anger requires more power than to explode in frustration. It is easier to let others shape you than to stand firm without becoming rigid. It is easier to hide behind silence than to speak calmly and consistently. Boundaries with grace demand practice, patience, and balance. They are not enforced once but maintained continually as situations evolve and relationships deepen. The grace is in how you adapt without collapsing, how you remain flexible without surrendering your essence. Sometimes the challenge lies not in setting boundaries with others, but in setting them with yourself. How often do you push yourself beyond your capacity, ignoring the body's signals for rest? How often do you allow the mind to spiral into endless distraction, unable to stop because you refuse to draw a line? Self-boundaries are acts of inner leadership. They remind you that freedom is not found in doing everything, but in choosing consciously what to allow and what to release. Grace in self-boundaries means treating yourself not as a harsh master would treat a servant, but as a wise guide treats a traveler, firm, compassionate, and patient. Boundaries are often tested. The world will always ask for more of your energy, your time, your presence. To hold your line gracefully is to recognize that saying no to what depletes you is saying yes to what sustains you. To protect your peace is not selfish, it is a responsibility. From a nourished state, you can give genuinely. From a drained state, every gift becomes heavy, every act of service becomes a burden. Boundaries with grace ensure that when you give, it is a flow, not a leak. Consider how water flows in a vessel. Without the vessel, the water has no form. Without the water, the vessel has no life. Boundaries are the vessel, and grace is the water. Together, they create balance. Too rigid a vessel and the water feels imprisoned. Too absent a vessel and the water spills into nothingness. The harmony lies in the middle path, strong enough to hold, soft enough to flow. Boundaries with grace also free others. When you communicate your limits clearly, others are not left guessing, stumbling, or resenting unseen rules. When you hold your space calmly, others learn to respect it, and perhaps even to create their own. Boundaries modeled with grace teach more than lectures ever could. They demonstrate that respect is mutual, that love and clarity can coexist, that saying no does not diminish connection but strengthens it. In the end, boundaries with grace are not about division, but about harmony. They are about learning to walk the middle path between openness and self-protection, between generosity and depletion, between silence and expression. They require courage to draw the line, wisdom to maintain it, and compassion to do so without hostility. When boundaries are rooted in fear, they imprison. When they are rooted in grace, they liberate. They allow both self and others to meet in authenticity, to engage in honesty, and to grow without exploitation. They are not barriers but invitations to meet each other from a place of respect, balance, and truth. Life is not a fixed state, nor is it meant to be lived as a rigid structure where one reaches a single point of knowledge and declares it enough. The truth of existence reveals itself as a constant unfolding, a never-ending stream of experiences and lessons, each one guiding us deeper into understanding. Continuous learning is not merely about academic pursuit, nor is it restricted to formal education. It is the ongoing process of refining perception, expanding awareness, and elevating one's capacity to meet the world with wisdom and adaptability. The human mind is a living instrument capable of expansion beyond imagination. Yet, when one decides they already know enough, that mind becomes a closed vessel, no longer able to receive new streams of insight. Imagine water filling a cup. When the cup is capped, nothing new can enter. Continuous learning requires the humility to keep the vessel open, to remain receptive, and to acknowledge that what you know today is only a fraction of what is possible. This openness is not weakness, but strength, because the willingness to learn keeps the individual in movement, and movement is life itself. In the practice of continuous learning, curiosity becomes the compass. It directs the attention toward questions rather than rigid answers, towards exploration rather than finality. A mind trained in curiosity will never tire of discovering, because it understands that every situation, every conversation, and every challenge is a teacher. The smallest detail can contain the greatest lesson if one's eyes are sharpened to see beyond the surface. It is not the lack of opportunities that keeps people stagnant, but rather the lack of openness to recognize learning in the ordinary. Continuous learning also dissolves the illusion of perfection. Many become trapped in the idea that they must master something fully before moving on, or that mistakes are failures to be ashamed of. But in reality, mistakes are integral to growth, feedback from life itself, showing where one's understanding needs to be stretched. To fear mistakes is to fear learning, and to fear learning is to stop growing. Just as a child must fall repeatedly before walking steadily, the adult must embrace imperfection as part of the path of wisdom. In this way, learning becomes not a burden but a rhythm, a natural cycle of attempting, observing, and adapting. There is also a profound relationship between continuous learning and humility. Knowledge without humility becomes arrogance, a closed gate that prevents further progress. When one believes they have reached the peak of knowing, they stop climbing. But humility allows one to realize that the mountain has no summit, only further paths to ascend. Every culture, every discipline, every person one encounters carries perspectives that can reveal new dimensions of truth. The wise understand that to listen, to observe, and to learn from others is not a lowering of self, but an elevation. It takes inner strength to remain teachable. In the realm of continuous learning, discipline also plays a crucial role. Learning is not only about inspiration, it is also about commitment. The mind must be trained to pay attention, to practice, to apply knowledge, rather than merely collect it. Without discipline, knowledge becomes scattered, like seeds thrown onto barren ground. But with discipline, learning transforms into growth as the seeds take root and flourish within the soil of practice. Continuous learning thrives in the balance of curiosity and discipline. Curiosity to seek new truths, and discipline to anchor those truths into lived experience. Another dimension of continuous learning lies in unlearning. Many carry beliefs, habits, and assumptions that no longer serve them, yet they cling to them because they have become familiar. To learn continuously is also to shed, to release outdated patterns that block growth. Just as a tree must let go of its old leaves to prepare for new ones, the individual must release old certainties to make room for new insights. Unlearning is not forgetting. It is refining, peeling away what no longer resonates so that space is made for deeper understanding. Continuous learning also extends beyond the self. It shapes how we connect with the world. A person who commits to learning continuously does not remain stagnant in their relationships, their work, or their role in society. They evolve, they adapt, and they inspire. Others are drawn to the energy of someone who is alive with growth, because that energy ignites growth in those around them. In this way, continuous learning is not only a personal practice, but a contribution to the collective, a ripple that expands outward and influences the wider field of human experience. This journey of constant growth does not promise comfort. To continuously learn is to continuously face the unfamiliar, to step into spaces of uncertainty, where the ego cannot rest on what it already knows. Yet within this discomfort lies the very power that expands the boundaries of what is possible. The discomfort of learning is the friction that sharpens the blade of understanding. Those who welcome this process become resilient, adaptable, and unshaken by change because they have trained themselves to flow with the new rather than resist it. The path of continuous learning is endless because life itself is endless in what it offers. Every breath is different from the last. Every moment contains a lesson if one is awake enough to perceive it. To live without learning is to move through life asleep, blind to the richness of what is unfolding. But to live with the spirit of continuous learning is to engage fully with existence, to treat every day as a teacher and every experience as an opportunity to expand one's being. In the world we live in today, the constant noise of approval surrounds us. We are measured by likes, shares, compliments, and recognition that flows in from the outside. But when the heart becomes addicted to validation, it begins to weaken. The one who depends on the applause of the crowd will always remain empty when silence returns. Outer validation, while sweet in the moment, is fleeting like a drop of water on hot stone. It sizzles, evaporates, and is gone before it can truly quench thirst. True strength is not born from these temporary affirmations. It emerges when the self no longer depends on what others think, but on the quiet and unshakable power that rests within. Inner strength is the root. while outer validation is merely the fruit. To rely on fruit is dangerous, for seasons change. Sometimes the tree blossoms, sometimes it bears no fruit at all. If a person builds identity on what is given from outside, then life will always be unstable, subject to forces beyond control. Inner strength, however, is the soil, the deep roots that hold firm regardless of weather. It does not vanish when people turn away. It does not diminish when applause ceases. It remains steady because it is not borrowed, it is owned. When we search for validation, it means we are still questioning our worth. We seek mirrors to reflect back to us an image that confirms what we fear to recognize on our own. But mirrors distort, and every reflection is dependent on the one who looks. If they smile, we glow. If they frown, we shrink. This dependency is a subtle form of bondage because our state of being is determined by another's fleeting perception. Inner strength begins when we break that chain. When the voice inside grows louder than the noise outside, then no mirror can define us anymore. The discipline of cultivating inner strength is not easy because it requires turning inward. Silence becomes both teacher and test. In silence, the masks of validation are removed. There is no one to impress, no one to applaud, no one to confirm. Only the raw self remains. Many fear this because it reveals where one's foundation truly lies. If that foundation is built on outer recognition, then silence feels like emptiness. But if the foundation is built on inner conviction, then silence feels like fullness. It is here that strength begins to bloom. Outer validation is a transaction. We perform, we receive. We conform, we are accepted. But inner strength is not transactional, it is transformational. It does not ask, what will I get? But instead says, this is who I am. It is forged through discipline, clarity, and a commitment to truth. The warrior does not wait for the crowd to approve of his training. He sharpens his blade in solitude, knowing that strength itself is the reward. Likewise, the seeker of inner strength does not beg for others to see their value. The recognition they carry is silent, but unshakable. There is a dangerous illusion in outer validation. It can create the impression that strength is present when in fact it is borrowed light. Compliments, awards, public recognition. All of these are like lanterns hung on a tree. They make the tree appear illuminated but remove the lanterns and the tree stands dark if no inner light is present. Inner strength, however, is like fire burning from within the trunk itself. No lantern is needed. It glows naturally, it radiates without effort. It cannot be extinguished by external changes. To cultivate this strength, one must learn detachment. Detachment not from life, but from dependency. The mind must be trained to function without craving recognition. Every action should arise from clarity, not from the desire for reward. When we live in this way, action itself becomes fulfillment. Whether others notice or not becomes irrelevant. This is freedom, and in freedom there is power. To act without needing approval is to discover how vast one's own energy truly is. When the storms of criticism arrive, the one addicted to outer validation crumbles. Harsh words pierce like arrows, and their entire sense of worth collapses. But the one rooted in inner strength stands like a mountain. Criticism may blow like wind, but mountains do not bow. This resilience is the sign of true power. The world will always shift between praise and blame, acceptance and rejection. To anchor oneself in these tides is to suffer endlessly. To anchor within is to rise above. Inner strength is not loud, it does not announce itself. It does not demand recognition. It is quiet, steady, and enduring. Like deep waters in a well, it may not be seen from the surface, but it nourishes life unceasingly. Outer validation is like rain. It arrives suddenly, refreshes briefly, and then disappears. The one who relies on rain will always thirst again. The one who draws from the inner well will never run dry. This is why the path of self-mastery is not about gaining louder applause, but about deepening silence within. It is not about convincing the world of who you are, but about knowing so firmly that even if the world denies it, your truth remains untouched. Outer validation may decorate your journey, but it cannot sustain it. Only inner strength carries you across all distances, through all terrains, under all skies. In life, there exists a subtle yet powerful art, the art of balancing compassion with firmness. It is not enough to be endlessly kind, nor is it sufficient to be constantly strict. Both extremes leave the human spirit out of balance. When compassion flows without boundaries, it can weaken one's ability to make clear decisions and protect their own energy. And when firmness hardens without compassion, it becomes cold discipline that may bring order, but lacks the warmth of humanity. True strength is revealed when one can embody both qualities together, shifting between them like the seasons shift between warmth and cold, yet never losing harmony in the process. Compassion is often misunderstood as softness or weakness, but in reality it is the ability to feel deeply, to understand another being, to meet them where they are without judgment. Compassion nurtures, heals, and restores. It creates an atmosphere where growth can happen because it carries no violence. Yet, when compassion is unchecked, when it becomes endless giving without discernment, it can turn into self-sacrifice that drains the very energy needed to uplift others. This is why compassion needs the balance of firmness. Firmness is often mistaken for harshness or lack of care. But true firmness is clarity. It is the strength to stand in one's values, to set boundaries, to say no when no must be said. Firmness protects compassion from dissolving into weakness. It ensures that kindness is not exploited, that gentleness is not mistaken for permission to abuse. Without firmness, compassion can be manipulated. Without compassion, firmness can become oppressive. The balance of the two creates a powerful center, where the heart remains open but the spine remains strong. This balance is reflected in nature. A tree stands tall because its trunk is firm, but it survives the storms because its branches are flexible. The river flows gently, nourishing everything in its path, yet it also carves valleys and reshapes mountains with steady force. The sun warms and gives life, but it also burns when its heat is unrelenting. Nature teaches that both softness and strength must exist together, and only in their harmony can life thrive. In the same way, the human spirit must cultivate this equilibrium between compassion and firmness in order to live with wisdom. In daily life, this balance shows itself in the way we treat others and ourselves. To have compassion is to forgive, but to have firmness is to remember the lesson. To have compassion is to listen, but to have firmness is to speak the truth when silence would cause harm. To have compassion is to accept mistakes, but to have firmness is to encourage responsibility. A parent who only shows compassion may raise a child who feels loved but unprepared for the challenges of life. A parent who only shows firmness may raise a child who becomes disciplined but struggles to feel loved. But a parent who balances both will raise a child who knows love yet also understands accountability. When turned inward, this balance is equally important. Compassion toward oneself allows healing. It softens the inner critic and offers patience in the face of failure. But firmness with oneself ensures that laziness does not disguise itself as self-care, that excuses do not replace growth, that one's higher potential is not abandoned for comfort. The self needs compassion to rest, but it also needs firmness to rise. Without this duality, either self-pity or self-harshness dominates, and the spirit loses its rhythm. To walk through life with only compassion or only firmness is to walk with one leg weaker than the other. You will stumble, you will tilt to one side. But when both legs are strong, the walk is steady, the journey smooth, the path enduring. This balance is not something that appears suddenly. It is cultivated through awareness and practice. It is born from mistakes, from observing where too much softness allowed harm and where too much hardness destroyed connection. It grows through reflection, through watching the effects of your actions, and through learning to adjust with each experience. Leaders, teachers, healers, and guides must learn this balance deeply. A leader who rules only with compassion may be loved but ineffective, unable to make difficult choices. A leader who rules only with firmness may be feared but disconnected, unable to inspire loyalty. The true leader stands at the center, compassionate enough to understand the people, firm enough to guide them toward what is right even when it is difficult. This principle extends to every relationship, friend to friend, mentor to student, partner to partner. Harmony is preserved only when compassion softens firmness and firmness strengthens compassion. This is also a path of inner cultivation. Compassion awakens the heart and firmness awakens the will. Together, they form a unity that allows a person to act with wisdom rather than impulse. When compassion dominates, action may become emotional, clouded by the desire to please. When firmness dominates, action may become rigid, driven by control rather than understanding. But when the two are aligned, action flows like water contained by the riverbank, free yet directed, soft yet strong, gentle yet powerful. The balance of compassion and firmness is not a destination, it is a practice that requires constant awareness. Every moment offers a test. Will you lean too far into softness or too far into hardness? Will you give without boundary? Or will you resist without empathy? Each situation calls for a different measure, just as each season requires a different response from nature. To walk this path is to continuously adjust, to refine the ability to sense what the moment requires, and to act from a place of grounded wisdom rather than extremes.